We have a win and you're in type moment here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as they host the New Orleans Saints. If they win this game, they lock up the NFC South and they are in the playoffs here. And Ryan and I, we're going to break down a game for you here in a second. But before we do that, Ryan and I, we are about 80 subscribers away from our year-end goal of 2,333 subscribers. To help us reach our goal real quick, like and subscribe to the channel here. And Ryan, let's throw it over to you here real quick. New Orleans versus Tampa Bay. These two teams played earlier in the year, division matchup. Tampa Bay dominated in the Superdome. They've been playing amazing as of late. That's what I was going to say is essentially we coming into the season, a lot of unknowns, so to say. But I would say in general, we've been pretty wrong about Tampa Bay. I think a lot of teams, a lot of people were wrong about Tampa Bay, except maybe Tampa Bay fans, diehard Tampa Bay fans. Well, the Saints, I would say we were right on the Saints. The Saints team's just not very good overall. And I think a lot of it has to stem from their offensive line. They were one of the weaker offensive. Honestly, if it wasn't for the Giants and how bad that offensive line is, they would have one of the weaker offensive lines. You could argue one of the weaker offensive lines in the league. What are your overall thoughts on both of these teams so far in the season that they've had as they're starting to go in different directions here?
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at the Saints, and they've kind of been up and down all year. They've had moments where they've looked like they've kind of put things together, and then they've shown that that is not true in other parts of the season. And then you go to the Buccaneers, and largely I think that they would have some big plays in a lot of games, and then that offense would kind of stall. But I mean, I think you look at their last, I think 3 performances, they've been solid offensive performances in and out of the entire game.
Mm-hmm.
And especially last week against that Bucs team, you really have to, or did against the Jags team, sorry. You really have to look at that and put a little bit of respect to that offense, because they just dominated that game for 4 quarters. And
Yeah.
I think that's a lot to be said about just kind of the growth that they've made. Also, Baker Mayfield, I don't think that there is that it's a coincidence that his play has been phenomenal, and then this offense has started clicking like immensely. Because you look at what he did in Green Bay, and last week he had another really solid game as well. And yeah, I mean, this team, they're finding their stride at the right time of the season. It does remind me a little bit of that Tom Brady 2020 season where, yeah, they had ups and downs all throughout the year, but then the final 5 weeks they put up like 30 plus in each game, and then they just kind of rolled right into the playoffs and continued doing that. Not saying that this is a Super Bowl caliber team, but I mean, that is kind of what happened.
You never know, man. Get to the playoffs and then just survive in advance.
Yeah.
Just keep winning. I think that's the thing too, because if I had a critique for both the Bucs and the Saints, like halfway through the season, is it felt like both of their offenses, they would just stall. They would just randomly stall. Like they'd have a good drive going, or they would just be a lot of just 3 and outs. So to say, even if you go back to that Falcons game as well, first 3 quarters of that game, it was 3 and outs, 3 and outs, 3 and outs. And then something clicked in that fourth quarter where they started to run the ball a bunch. Actually, even in that game, they ran for 148 yards against that Falcons team. And so, and they're not the best running team in the league. But in general, though, what we've seen over these past couple of weeks, really from that fourth quarter of that Falcons game on, is they have been able to finish drives. And I think a lot of it does have to stem from Baker Mayfield and that performance, his connection with Mike Evans, who is a future first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, he's having just another incredible season, 1,163 yards. Chris Godwin's having a good season so far. Rachaad White is having a solid season. Maybe he'll get to 1,000-yard rushing, depending on over these last 2 weeks. And so I say that now about being able to finish drives, get points on the board. The Saints, that's still, in my eyes, their problem this entire year. They're able to put up yards and move the ball down the field, but then they either have self-inflicted wounds, like turn the ball over, get penalties and holdings, or they have to settle for a lot of field goals. And we saw that a lot too in the last time we saw them as well, because they just couldn't put the ball. They couldn't score until the fourth quarter. And when the Rams were like prevent defense, were up 3 scores. That's how then they slowly started to walk their way back in. And defenses, when they had that big lead against the Saints, that's when they've started to be successful offensively, is those fourth quarter kind of almost garbage time type points as well, where the team's like, all right, we've got this game in the bag, let's just not blow it up. And I think a lot of it, maybe Derek Carr's overrated. Maybe he's not having the best season. He has been banged up a lot. So there's different arguments I would love to hear and can listen to. But still, I think to me, it all comes back to just that their offensive line and their overall core unit is just not the best, like one of the worst in the league. And so and Derek Carr needs to have a good pocket, needs to have that pocket presence. He's not the modern day type quarterback, I would say, where you can have him rolling out of the pocket, improvising, so to say. He needs to be in kind of that structured system. And they have good receiving weapons. I mean, Chris Olave, I think, is a future star, if not already a star. Rashid Shaheed has had a good season so far. I do like Jawan Johnson, thinks he's a solid tight end. I think maybe they could probably add to that receiver room in the offseason, because I think they're saying goodbye to Michael Thomas as well. But honestly, when I watch the Saints play, a lot of it is just a bunch of dink and dunk to Alvin Kamara. It's like 4 verts and then like clear out the underneath and then just throw to Alvin Kamara, who's your most athletic player, essentially. So and that will work down the field. But then when you get closer to the red zone, teams like, well, you don't have that space. You just don't have that space to run that far. So love to hear from the Saints fan. Maybe if I'm wrong, but I feel like being a Falcons fan, obviously following both of these teams, the Bucs have figured it out, and Baker Mayfield's been playing better. Well, I think the Saints, they're still struggling with that same issue that they've had all year, which is just finishing drives, putting touchdowns on the board. So what are your overall thoughts from both these teams?
Yeah, I mean, the Saints, kind of what I said before, the Saints to me have just been inconsistent. I think they had the one game against the Jags that they actually still lost, but I thought that they had at least one solid drive in every quarter that resulted in points, I think 3 of which were touchdowns. And outside of that, I just haven't seen the production that I've really wanted to see out of this Saints offense. And it does kind of go back to, we talked a little bit about this in the offseason, is they are in cap hell every single offseason. And they find ways to like get out of it, but they're constantly kicking the can down the road. They're constantly restructuring contracts. And to me, I think it just puts them in a situation every offseason where they're restructuring these contracts. They're signing okay players, but they're not like really getting better. They're just kind of
always stuck in this mediocrity. This like 7 to 9 win range.
And that's one thing too, is like, as a Patriots fan, this is the situation I don't want them to be in, but they're just in this cycle of mediocrity. Like, they can't get out of it because they're too good or they're good enough not to be picking in like the top 5, but they're not good enough to really be competing for anything. Mm-hmm. So, whereas on the flip side, I think the Bucs kind of went and did, that was my chair, sorry. The Bucs, they kind of went out and did like a pseudo rebuild. They stayed within their cap space, right? They had a ton of negative cap. They did restructure some deals to get out of it, but then they didn't go buy the $40 million quarterback. They took the $7 million guy and said, this is what we're rocking with. And like, it's worked out for them. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see what these teams do. Let's go ahead and get into our predictions here, although I think we've kind of given that away. But before we do that, if you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Tyler and I, we have a unique goal of getting 2,333 subscribers, which would put us at 2,000 subscribers in a calendar year. So if you could help us reach that goal, we'd be very much appreciative. And Tyler, let's go ahead and tell the people why we are taking the Bucs in this matchup.
Yeah, I think the Bucs are going to clinch the division here. As much as I hate saying that, Falcons, I mean, I personally think the Falcons are probably the better team. I'm maybe biased saying that, but you guys, I know, right? I know, yeah. But the Bucs this second half of the season haven't shot themselves in the foot. Falcons have, and at the end of the day, it's like you just got to play the game and win. And so I think the Bucs are going to do it here. I think that they deserve it. They played the more consistent football, I would say, throughout the season. Also, too, I would say they've shown the most improvement of everybody in the NFC South here. Sorry, Panthers. You guys have stayed status quo the entire time. But it's the Saints and Falcons have just not improved nearly as much, while the Buccaneers, especially to shout out Baker Mayfield, talking about $40 million quarterbacks. I think he's about to get paid this offseason. So I think he's earned every right to stay in Tampa Bay. So I think they're going to win here, going to lock in the division, and then host a playoff game.
Yeah, no, I'm going with the Bucs as well. That to me, I think, is the big key for the Bucs was the improvement that you said. I think you look at the Panthers, the Falcons, and the Saints. And the Panthers, they have improved, but they started so low that improvement now has them they're playing as a bottom 10, 15 team in the NFL. And that's really, I think, just because of their lack of weapons. I think you look at the Falcons, and there's a saying, when you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one. And I think like the constant switching from Desmond Ridder to Taylor Heineke to back, while I agree with all of those moves, I think it's like the fact that you've had to go from Desmond Ridder to Taylor Heineke, back to Desmond Ridder, now back to Taylor Heineke, I think kind of tells the story of this Falcon season, of just you guys haven't had a guy that can come in and consistently play that position well. You guys have also had a good bit of injuries on the defensive side of the ball. And then the Saints, I think, have just kind of been flat this whole season. Like, they haven't really gotten worse. They haven't really gotten better. And they really have just kind of struggled to truly compete, I think, with a lot of these good teams. And I think the Bucs are competing with a lot of the good teams. So let's go ahead and wrap this video up here. Tyler and I, we have a unique goal of getting to 2,333 subscribers. If you could help us reach that goal, that would be very much appreciated. Go ahead and leave a comment on who you think is going to come out ahead in this matchup. Is it going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the New Orleans Saints? And that we will see you guys next time.